The president is fed up, not with invading marauders or Jim Acosta's hot wind, but with the Federal Reserve. In a wide-ranging, verbally impulsive interview with the Washington Post, he touched on a common frustration shared by economic libertarians when he said, quote, "I am not at all happy with the Fed. I am not at all happy with my choice. So I'm doing deals and I'm not being accommodated by the Fed. I'm not happy with the Fed. They're making a mistake because I have a gut, and my gut tells me sometimes, more sometimes than anyone else's brain can ever tell me. I'm not just saying I'm not happy with the Fed." Well, do you know what you can do, Mr. President, or at least what you can strongly suggest to some like-minded liberty folk on the links at Mar-a-Lago? End the Fed. Tell your friends in Congress that. This fuss budget central bank is an opaque bubble factory that exacerbates income inequality by acting in secret, printing money, and devaluing our currency with almost no oversight. The president often claimed the Fed kept interest rates at zero for too long to prop up the flimsy Obama economy, and he's kind of asking Chairman Jay Powell to do the same thing for him. When the Fed raises rates, as they're bound to do, by 0.25% next month for the fourth time this year, it spooks the stock market, which has already birthed and popped more bubbles than a porcupine in a soap factory. When rates go up, markets drop. Yeah, it's a vicious cycle brought on by an unnecessary monopoly that drives deficit spending and inflation as it rests on a foundation of sand and smog. If no one has the nards to do what is morally and monetarily just by ending the Fed, then at least audit the damn thing like Kentuckians Thomas Massie and Rand Paul want to do, so this heartless vampire can dissolve in some much-needed sunlight. Take that, bloodsucker. And that's the memo. So is there any hope of getting rid of this central planning behemoth? How would we do it, and what would a replacement look like? Joining me now, Jeffrey Tucker, editorial director at the American Institute for Economic Research. Welcome, Jeffrey.
It's so nice to be here. Thank you. Good editorial. I enjoyed that.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate how you have written so passionately about the Fed. But I want to ask you practically, if we were going to do this, and this has long been a pipe dream of those who think that we should be on the gold standard and have real economic liberty in this country, how would we end the Fed?
Yeah, I love the idea of a gold standard. That's great. But I don't think it's necessary. I've thought about this a lot. I used to think it was really complicated to try to get rid of the Fed. You know how I think you get rid of the Fed now? You just shutter the doors. You just close it and forget it. I mean, it's actually not necessary. It doesn't do anything, really. I mean, bank clearing can be handled by the banks themselves. Monetary affairs can be managed by the banks themselves. We don't need a central planner setting the federal funds rate. Banks can do that themselves. Private sector can govern itself. We have interest rates being set all the time. And I don't think that the Fed does anything that we really need to have done. I mean, the regional
I think you
Fed
could say that about most of the federal government, but the problem is the unintended consequences of the Federal Reserve creating these frustrations throughout the economy. And when this kind of central planning is too aggressive, it really does exacerbate so many areas that it brings the economy down. Now, is the president saying that he wants the Fed chair to keep the rates lower so his economic policies can have the same kind of protection that he blamed the Fed for giving President Obama?
Yeah. No, I understand. His instincts are not incorrect that the Fed is basically a relic of a technocratic age. It's undemocratic. He resents the hold that the Fed has over his own economic recovery. I kind of get that. I'm not sure if he's right about the pace at which rates should increase or decrease. And really, I'm not sure really Trump knows the answer to that. And here's the thing. I don't think the Fed knows the answer to that either. A lot of times it seems like these guys are just improvising all the time. And like I say, I just don't think we need this kind of central planning. I think Trump's instincts to go after the Fed are good. Maybe he should just use the opportunity to shut the doors.
Does Congress have to do that?
Let the banking system.
How would you end it? I mean, practically, is it something that you would have to do through legislation? Or could the president just write an executive order one day, just wake up super cranky and be like, the Fed is done, the end?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I mean, if Congress created the Federal Reserve more than 100 years ago, and I'm assuming that it would have to take some legislation to finally get rid of it, and it's long past time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as you said, it's just been one disaster after another, decade after decade of disasters. 100 years of failure
Mm-hmm.
is enough. I don't know. Maybe Trump could try an executive order.
Okay, we're running out of time. We only have a few seconds left.
Why not give it a try?
Jeffrey, I want to ask you: will cryptocurrency outlive the Federal Reserve?
Yeah, well, certainly. We are living in an age of monetary competition now for the first time after a century of monopolization. Nothing's going to change that. We've got better money now than the Fed is producing, and I think we need to recognize that reality. It is a reality. Nothing's going to change that.
All right, Jeffrey Tucker, thank you so much. Love it.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Thanks. More trouble brewing.